Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Sojourning Writer. Today we're going to do things a little bit differently. Instead of actually taking a look at a book or a series of books, what we're actually going to do is actually take a look at a specific character in the story of Lord of the Rings, specifically Fellowship of the Ring. Boromir is the one that we're going to be taking a look at today, and the idea is that Boromir is probably the most realistic character in the first book specifically. So what we're going to do is we're going to go through and look at different scenes that this character is in or is adjacent to, and see how we can actually learn from how Tolkien created this character. Now, one of the things that I want to point out is that this character is kind of a little bit different than Aragorn. While they're both men, this is a man who's proud of his heritage, a man who has lived not as long as Aragorn, but has been passed down all the mythos of his history and something that he's proud of. For me, the way that I see the Boromir character is not that he is a fallen man or he's prone to weakness, but a little bit more than that. He's a man who's been put into a situation where he has to protect the realm. He is a prince of a type. He's the guy who's supposed to be delivering his people from certain death or certain destruction from Mordor. So, and one of the first scenes we're going to take a look at, it's a flashback of the whole scene where Faramir is thinking back about the time when his brother conquered or reconquered Esgiliath. What happened is that, and it goes into the scene a little bit later, is that Faramir's responsibility was to take care of the city, but because of what had happened, the fact that he didn't have enough men to hold it, they had to go back in and retake it. Boromir is a hero to his people. He is the person that has led his men to victory. Everybody looks up to him. That changes how a man views himself. When a man is able to overcome an enemy and gets the adulation of his men, the love of his men to overcome the struggle, that changes how a man views himself. Yes, he is not necessarily the selfish person that sometimes we might think, but rather he's a good leader. He's a highly competent leader. But he's been sucked in by an idea that he is the hero of the story. And that changes how a man sees himself. One of the things that we have to realize, just like ourselves, but also our characters, is that sometimes our reality is warped by situations around us. Well, that might not necessarily be the truth of the matter, because regardless of how much you wish it, the sky doesn't change any color but blue. And that's what Boromir is fighting against. The problem is that because he grew up in this situation, because he grew up as Denethor's son, Denethor's favorite son, he doesn't see anything different. He doesn't see where he is weak to the temptation of the ring. One of the things that Denethor does is, because he loves Boromir so much, is that his love puts blinders on Boromir. He's unable to see outside of his own perspective. And this is something that Peter Jackson really gets into, is that Boromir's a tragic figure. That he is as powerful and as competent and as heroic as Boromir is, he has an Achilles heel. And his Achilles heel is his lack of information and his lack of his own weakness. That is Achilles heel that typically, unless it's not done right, can be very bad reading or very bad character development. But we see this character, particularly in this scene here, where Boromir is told by his father that he is to go get the ring, the one ring to bring back so that they can use it to destroy Mordor. Here's a hint of it. There's a lore to the ring, but Denethor banishes that idea and says, no, you can save it. You can give us the chance to destroy the enemy. This is the big struggle. You don't see this scene until the second movie, but this is a very pivotal scene for the character Boromir and sets up his journey. In the next scene here, we see Aragorn this is in Rivendell. And one of the things that you need to know about the story in the book is that Boromir isn't going to Rivendell because he is summoned from Elrond, but rather the idea is that him and his brother Faramir both have dreams where they are told to go to Rivendell to find Doom. There's no other reason why they make this character is to go there, and we're not really given an understanding who gave him the vision. It's kind of left up into the void. But the thing here is that this gives us a difference between the two characters, between Aragorn and Boromir. Aragorn is somebody who knows the truth of his own weakness. He has grown up in exile, essentially. In the book, his group, the Dunedain, his brothers, are in exile after the fall of Numenor. They are rangers. They are not princely people. But Boromir is. He grew up in a city. He grew up sophisticated. He grew up with education beyond what Aragorn probably had. Now, the thing I find interesting here is that Boromir doesn't pay reverence to the history, which is probably an indication from Peter Jackson that because he doesn't revere, he doesn't pay attention, he doesn't recognize history for the value that it has, he is susceptible to the temptation of the ring. Now, one of the other sides of this is that Boromir is the polar opposite of Aragorn. While Aragorn is the true king, he is so full of self-doubt, he's so full of his own shortcomings, his own weakness, that he is reluctant to take up the crown. But the thing is opposite of that is Boromir is ready to take the crown. He is ready to protect his people, to lead his men to victory. And that's the difference between Aragorn and Boromir. And that's not to say that Boromir is wrong for that as a mindset, but rather that this is a situation where we are developing the two characters together, where Boromir has to learn from Aragorn, but Aragorn has to recognize that there are times where he has to give up those fears to do the right thing. In this next clip, we're seeing Aragorn and the revelation that to Boromir of who Aragorn actually is. As we can see here is that there's a council to figure out what to do with the ring. From the get-go, it's implied that Boromir is shown the ring as a way of destroying Sauron, the old enemy of Gondor, the old enemy of the people. We have to remember that in the book, Gondor has been fighting Mordor, the forces of Mordor, for decades, for longer than Boromir has been alive. In the book, it's during the period of The Hobbit, which happened 50-something years before this situation, that you see the fact that Gandalf as well as other high-powered individuals moved Sauron from Dol Guldur to Mount Doom, to Mordor. Now, they didn't realize at the time that what they were removing from Mirkwood was Sauron, and this is something that Sauron used to his advantage. But the thing is that allowed Sauron to take advantage of the situation. This scene here is really good because what happens is that Boromir is shown as not fully understanding what's going on or what the evil that he is truly fighting. He is seeing it from a purely physical man versus orc mentality. This is a hint to Boromir of what is supposed to go on or what is going on with the ring. So the idea here is that we also need to take into account that this is not just figuring out what to do with the ring, but also how Boromir is recognizing what is to go on with it. Here we see Boromir trying to make the case that they can use this ring to destroy Mordor so that the sacrifice that his people have been making for decades is not in vain. That is what he is calling for here. But Aragorn here, recognizing the evil that the ring is, that it has its own will, that it is corrupting in its nature. This is where you see the two different sides of the human coin. One who recognizes his own weakness and recognizes that he is fallible, versus the hero in his own mind. Boromir is that hero, the man who is conquered and developed himself to save those around us. Somebody who's not necessarily selfish, but somebody who's been put into a situation where he is required to go above and beyond, and he's in a losing situation. Boromir knows he's in this losing situation, so he's looking for whatever possible to claim that victory. Now, as we move on, we see that Boromir is accepted into the Fellowship. And here we see him at his truest sense, his most caring sense, is that he's trying his best to ensure that the hobbits are able to defend themselves. He's taking advantage of the time that they have to rest so they can teach the hobbits how to defend themselves. This is not necessarily a combat trek, but rather a stealthy one. But the thing is that even if the best case scenario takes place, you're always going to have a chance of falling into fighting. And so the thing in this scene is that Boromir is taking advantage of the rest time to develop the hobbits. This gives us a little bit of seeing what Boromir's like and the type of person that Boromir is to those around him. He's a loving, affable creature who helps wherever he can. In this next scene, we see the early temptation of the ring on Boromir. In this, what happens here is Frodo falls down and the ring comes undone. This is sort of the same thing that you have for the character with Gollum. But here we see where the temptation for the ring has begun to take root in Boromir's mind. What we have here is a scene where he's finally realizing that there's a disconnect. Something so small is having such an impact. But what he doesn't realize is that he has a hole in his armor, that he has a chance to fall. And that's one of the things that the ring does, is it doesn't let you realize that you are falling to the poison. Such a slow element of the story of the ring is that it's such a subtle way of it happening that he falls to it without realizing it. Now, this is a lot later in the story, where after they leave Lothlorien, here is also an indication that Boromir has followed Frodo. The thing is in this scene that Frodo was really struggling with the ring. He's struggling what he has to do. The experience he had in Lothlorien really caused him to have a struggle with how he was dealing with the weight of the ring. And it's not just a physical weight, but a mental weight. But what happens is this puts Frodo in a vulnerable situation where the opportunity for Boromir to seize the weapon that he can use to defend his people is in front of him. He tries to rationalize it to Frodo. He tries to say, hey, we can do this thing for the benefit of all. We don't need to destroy the ring. It's foolish. The problem is that because he's so deep into the situation that he doesn't recognize how far he's fallen into the temptation, how much he's in the grasp of the ring. And in a moment of madness, when he's shown a reflection of himself, he doesn't react well. He actually tries to take the ring from Frodo. Here we see how Frodo is trying to end up having to use the ring in order to escape from Boromir. Here we can see the final straw in Boromir snap, where Boromir is ranting and raving absolute nonsense. But it's right after this where he slips right here, and he is shocked out of his madness. But at the same time, shocked out of his madness, he's shocked out of the temptation. And it's when he realizes what he has done, where the horror of that tragedy, that horror of that damage that he has caused, it rends his heart. Now, what ends up happening in the situation is that Frodo has to hide, and he ends up meeting with Aragorn. But then the Uruk-hai show up. And when the Uruk-hai show up, Boromir ends up saving Merry and Pippin from being killed, but he ends up dying in their place. This scene is probably the most impactful one of the whole movie. Here we see Boromir finally recognize he failed the Fellowship. It doesn't matter that he gave his life, but the thing here is that this is where Aragorn's arc changes, where he gives up the idea of being a lone wanderer here, where he gives up the idea of forsaking Gondor, forsaking the world of men, but somebody that is giving in and fulfilling a promise that he made to a dying comrade, a dying friend that he cared about. We see this not just in his words, but also in the imagery. Later on in the movie, Aragorn takes the bracers of Boromir and puts it on himself. That's a symbolizing of taking on the responsibility of saving Gondor. Something else you should take a look at is there's a YouTube channel called Jess of the Shire. One of the videos I watched while preparing for this video, I would highly suggest taking a look at hers. It's a fantastic video. As always, I will be linking her video in the description below. So as a recap, one of the things that we have to pay attention to is when we're writing our characters is that they cannot be just the person who does the thing. But how does that doing of the action, that journey, affect them? How does their journey play a part in their arc? How does their preconceived notions, how does the information that they don't have play in how they interpret reality? Because it's a lot of the time the information that we don't have that ends up giving us more problems later on. All right, everybody, that's all I had for today. As always, if you have any questions, comments, and concerns, please leave them in the comment section below. Until next time, bye.
I am a poor, wayfaring stranger. I'm traveling through this world of woe. Yet there's no sickness, toil, nor danger in that bright land to which I